when I play Hamilton, I'm playing my father. It is that, I wouldn't say it, no, I don't think it's an awe. It's sort of like, oh my God, he's relentless, calm down.
Well, welcome. I think the audience is very excited about this.
Zeitgeist?
Yeah, look at Zeitgeist. We got our phones out. I hope they're all pixels. All right. Well, we are going to have quite the conversation. We're going to talk about economic recovery, economic opportunity. We're going to talk about so many things, but let's start with the most important things, your kids.
Yeah, surely.
So in addition to everything that you're doing in your career, I know you're also a family man. You have 2 children.
I do have 2 boys.
2 boys, okay. I think this audience would like to know what they're going to be for Halloween.
Yes, that's exactly what they came to Phoenix to learn.
And I have pictures.
Oh, yeah, I bet you do.
We're in major Lion King mode.
Okay.
So my older son, Sebastian, is obsessed with all things Lion King. He has a menagerie of animals wherever he is. He sets up a Pride Rock situation. So he's going to be Simba. Actually, no, he's going to be Kion, which is the TV spin-off son of Simba. Those of you who have children already know. And his little brother is going to be a cub. We bought a lion outfit for his little brother, too, and he said, that has a mane. Cubs don't have manes. You're going to have to cut that off.
Wow, all right.
It's very specific.
Letting little brother know he's still cub.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, let's start with Hamilton. I think we have some interest in the global phenom that is Hamilton. You know, one of the things that I read about in doing research for this conversation is that the average Broadway attendee is a sort of middle-aged, white woman, upper income, and yet you
I think she's here. Hi.
I think she's here. Just, not mentioning any names or anything, but...
I've met her. She's great.
Yeah. But the magic of Hamilton is that you created this piece of art, this show that features a cast that's mostly people of color, in the music influenced by hip hop. Just what does that say to you about the ability to have art speak to all of us, and in these times to bring us together?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the average Broadway attendee, because we grew up not really being able to afford Broadway shows. We grew up falling in love with cast albums, which is how most people fall in love with Broadway. I remember playing my parents' Man of La Mancha and Camelot and Fiddler on the Roof, and then falling in love with theater as we did it. And it always felt like something old rich white folks wrote and old rich white folks saw, and we got to listen to the cast albums at home.
Although middle-aged white woman, that's not old. That's
when I'm a little, everyone's
still.
old.
Yeah, okay.
I'm talking from my little kid perspective.
Right.
And so I remember seeing Rent for my 17th birthday, and it was the first show I saw that felt contemporary, and it felt like, this is about now. They always took place in some other land and in some other place, and it's what gave me permission to start writing musicals. It was sort of, that musical more than any just said, you're allowed to write about what you know and put it in a musical. It doesn't have to take place in France or in London, like Phantom and Les Mis, which were the only 2 musicals I'd ever seen. And so what's been incredible about the success of Hamilton is that, from the moment I picked up Ron Chernow's biography, I realized 2 things. One, I learned for the first time that Hamilton was sort of the only one of those founders who was not from the colonies. He was the outsider. He was the immigrant. And I suddenly understood him in a way, because I was like, I know that guy. He's the guy who has to work 5 jobs while everyone else only has 1 job. That's always been the story of the immigrant in our country. And you take that as a prerequisite. That's the asking price for the American dream. He reminded me of my father. He came to New York at the same age my father came to New York. My father didn't speak the language. That was an additional barrier that Hamilton didn't face. And then he was just sort of relentless in writing articles under pseudonyms. And I just thought he was so hip-hop, because he wrote his way into every situation. And he wrote his way into trouble and out of trouble. And it reminded me of the energy of my favorite hip-hop artists. And so we cast it accordingly. And I think the real big takeaway, bless you, has been that that the show has done well, and that this
quite well.
This preconception that and I was sort of startled that the casting of it was such a big deal. I was like, well, if I wrote a hip-hop R&B musical and it was all white people on stage, wouldn't you think I messed up? Wouldn't you think that's not the right fit for the music that you've written? It was always, the goal was to write this hip-hop R&B musical and cast the best people to deliver that music and tell the story of America then told by America now. Now, that being said, we love that lady, that middle-aged lady. She's the one who goes to see theater every season. But to me, this whole thing would be a failure if we didn't expand sort of the opportunities for everyone to see it. And we realized really quickly off Broadway, like, oh, school groups aren't going to be able to see the show unless we prioritize them. So we started Eduham, which is this curriculum. And by the end of next year, we'll serve how many?
By the end of next year, our goal, and by the way, thank you very much, Google, it's one of the supporters of the Hamilton Education Program, 250,000 kids from throughout the country.
From Title I schools,
would have gone through the curriculum that uses the music and the lyrics of Hamilton, the actual American history that we all learn in 10th or 11th grade, and then they create their own pieces of art, present it on stage, and then they enjoy Hamilton.
And the best part is that I think that's the real legacy of the show is this program because, Hamilton is 2.5 hours of whatever I could fit in as much time as I have with you in an evening of theater. But what these kids do is they begin to write pieces based on history that's interesting to them. They perform it on stage for us. This is not like you see a show and, yay, we taught you, goodbye. This is weeks of curriculum. They pick the best groups from their schools. They perform on the Broadway stage. They get their Broadway debut. We watch them perform. They cheer for each other. They do a Q&A with the cast. Then we perform for them. And the pieces these kids write, I mean, Google it if you, Google it, press I'm feeling lucky. And you'll see the most incredible performances by these kids that are just scratching the surface of telling stories and historical stories and realizing that the teller of the story, I mean, we just had Ta-Nehisi Coates. What better proof is there of like, if you don't, the teller determines the story and uncovering the stories that we don't always learn in school.
And Hamilton just served as the portal for history. They could go to any of the characters that appears as part of American history, but they could go through the website and pick whomever they want that was part
That's pretty cool.
of that American history.
So Lin, one of your songs, NonStop, has lyrics, why do you write like you're running out of time? Write day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Keep on fighting in the meantime, nonstop. Do you want to share with us the inspiration for that?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Listen, my job is really simple and really complicated. When I'm writing a musical, I research the world I'm writing about, I think about what that character is feeling in that situation, and then I talk to myself and I play that character until it feels true. And when it feels true, I write it down. It's not much deeper than that. But getting to that moment is the hardest part. And in that song, I am distilling all the post-war years and all of Hamilton's activity from the moment of the end of the American Revolution to, the first government, the first president being set up. That's about 10 years I got to cover in about 4 minutes, 3 minutes. And Hamilton passed the bar exam, set up a legal practice, wrote 51 of the Federalist Papers, had a load of kids. It's an enormous amount. And so I told it from the perspective of Aaron Burr, of whom we know less. And so me writing about that is really me writing about Hamilton, of how do you operate as if you are aware a clock is ticking all the time. Because I think we all like to think we operate that way. And then 5 episodes into our Netflix binge, we realize, oh, maybe I didn't use this time so great. And I'm sort of, I think we all are in awe of people who really, who make their mark on the world. I think of the Beatles who, they broke up before they turned 30. What do you do in the face of that? And so, it's not hard for me to get in that place. I am the laziest member of this family, as you'll see when you talk to Luis Moore.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so I relate. It comes from a very personal place.
So let's talk about identity, and we've had some really good conversations today, in fact, about identity and belonging and inclusion. Luis, you've come and spoken to my team, and we talked about your sense of identity and how that's informed your work. I know you, Lynn, as well, having grown up in New York, Puerto Rican descent. What really strikes me about both of you is just how deep that runs and how that informs how you choose to engage in the world.
I think that at the end of the day, you are more than the sum of your parts. There was an identity that I got in my first 18 years in Puerto Rico that actually sort of flourished right after Maria. I was always involved in Puerto Rico, but it was more from a family perspective. Right. I will go and see my parents, I will go and see my family, I will do little things in the island, but right after Maria, I realized...
Just reminding the audience, Maria...
Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico on September 20th, 2 years ago. And right after that, I realized now is your time to sort of pay back and sort of be part of that community that helps Puerto Rico. And quite frankly, in addition to everything we did and continue to do, again, with your help, Google was one of the first to, on Puerto Rican Day, Parade Day in New York, you guys started a match program where you were matching every dollar that people were giving to recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. And quite frankly, in addition to all the good that we have done, the most rewarding part of this experience is to realize that my kids, in spite of the fact that they were born and raised in New York, they're Puerto Rican. And that was such a revelation. I knew they liked Puerto Rico. I knew they liked their family in Puerto Rico. But, Lin-Manuel and my daughter Lucecita stopped their lives to work for Puerto Rico for 6 months. And you don't do that intellectually. You could only do that if your heart and your mind are in the right place.
And you together as a family have raised more than $45 million for recovery efforts and an additional $15 million to support the arts in Puerto Rico. Do you want to speak to us a little bit about how that recovery work is going in Puerto Rico now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first 6 months, it's true, Hurricane Maria hit and our lives went on hold, and I was out of the country when it hit, and I began writing a song because that's how I know how to enter the world. So I wrote this song called Almost Like Praying, again, stealing from my musical theater forebears, realizing Maria would forever have a different association after this hurricane. So I took from the song Maria from West Side Story, and I took the hook, and the lyrics of the songs are the 78 towns in Puerto Rico, and we used that for fundraising efforts immediately after, and it was really critical efforts that we funded through the Hispanic Federation. And the Hispanic Federation was able to sort of work locally with mayors and get to all 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico. And then sort of the next phase of that was Hamilton in Puerto Rico. I always wanted to bring Hamilton to Puerto Rico. I always want to bring everything I do to Puerto Rico. There we are. And so we knew we were going to go, and then the conversation after Maria became, well, how can we leave Puerto Rico better than we found it? And so we decided to focus on arts organizations, which are always forgotten in recovery efforts, but there's artists on our island, and I think the arts are one of Puerto Rico's greatest cultural exports, and we wanted to make sure the artists and artistic organizations on the island flourished. So we raised $15 million through me coming back to Hamilton, and basically we opened a new tour of Hamilton in Puerto Rico. That tour is now in San Francisco if you want to see it. They're an incredible cast. But I only did it with them in Puerto Rico.
They don't have Puerto Rican flags in San Francisco.
Yeah, they have them, but they don't wave them at the end of the show. It would be weird. But it was an incredible month, and we kind of continue to help wherever we can.
Great. Well, we'll come back to some of the work in Puerto Rico and have an invitation for the audience to join us. But you also mentioned, Lynn, your father's work starting the Hispanic Federation. This is another partnership that we have together. Do you want to speak to how your father started this work and the work that they're doing in the world? And
Sure. I was 10 years old when he began it, coming from working for the mayor's office, and really it's funny to now I work with this national organization, but it was where I did my homework after school when I was a kid in their old offices on 37th and 8th. But I mean, you can speak more to how it began, but it began as a way to unite Latino organizations. There was no sort of larger umbrella organization that was not only uniting these groups, but also collecting data on them, releasing an annual census saying, this is what the Latino United States is starting to look like. This is how they vote. This is what they buy, and really sort of growing into a really powerful force in their own.
And sort of taking whichever way we have now evolved in terms of what is politically correct, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, creating that as a reality. Because when we started back in 1990, people felt they were Mexican or Mexican descent, Puerto Rican or Puerto Rican descent, and every single one of our countries. So it was creating an organization that could work with every group and figure out what brings us together and how can we support the organizations that are helping in those communities. So that was the concept, and help them with the things that partly no one wants to fund. Like, no one wants to fund an audit. But if you don't have an audit, you cannot do a 990, and you cannot go to your foundation and request dollars. So thinking of the ways in which we could be helpful to organization beyond programming, which is always critical for communities.
yeah. So I've had now some time with you individually and you together, and I can say one of my favorite things is to just watch you interact as a father-son duo, because you both have so much energy, so much love for one another. But I'm also just curious about your relationship and curious about, what happens when you disagree with one another.
That's every 5 minutes. But it's also,
Lynn, looks like we've got.
Oh my goodness! Oh, that's my grandma's old porch swing.
That's some serious hair there, Luis.
Yeah, that's.
I know.
That's peak
I know.
80s.
It was my Pancho Villa look.
But I say this with no sort of exaggeration. When I play Hamilton, I'm playing my father. It is that. I wouldn't say it. No, I don't think it's an awe. It's sort of like, oh my God, he's relentless. Calm down. He is the person who, when we have finished one task, he goes, okay, on to the next task. And I go, can we just celebrate that we finished one task for a second?
And we celebrate.
He's Hamilton and I'm Burr.
The second task.
He's Hamilton and I'm Burr, basically. I used to work for him in the summers, and that did not work. That was sort of the worst our relationship ever was. I, for better or worse, if you know any artists, they care about what they care about, and it is very hard to get them to care about what they don't care about. And so I got busted down to data entry when I worked under him. And now that we work together side by side, it's a lot easier because we find the things that we care about together and work very passionately.
Do you still have him doing data entry, or do you?
No. He makes too many mistakes.
Spoken like a true father.
Fair enough.
So I also hear as part of your relationship that you like writing each other handwritten letters. So I don't know if
We actually did
in
when
college.
handwriting was in before the digital world.
In the previous 2,000 years. In college we wrote each other letters.
And actually, I kept those letters. You read some of them the other day.
Yeah.
He was in the house last year for like a week or so because he got sick. and he couldn't get everyone else contagious in his home. So he figured, my dad and mom are old anyway. So if they get sick, who cares?
Yep, that was the math.
And my wife saves everything. But you don't get it.
I have my Dear Santa letters.
Like everything. Like I was looking at stuff and I could see his kindergarten letters. And in those letters, I found all of the letters that we wrote to each other while he was in college. And many of them were around In the Heights and what was going to happen in the Heights since he started writing In the Heights in Wesleyan.
Yeah.
And they were very insightful. He's a wonderful kid and very, very bright. And he was then as bright and as wonderful as he is now.
Thank you. Well, one of the most moving ones I found in that pile was I wrote him because my first job out of school was teaching. I taught 7th grade English at my old high school. And they offered me a full-time position. And I actually wrote to my dad, which is crazy. I lived 5 blocks away from him. But I wrote him a letter. And I said, I really want to finish In the Heights and see it through, but I love teaching. I truly loved it, and I can see myself doing that. And he wrote me back this letter saying, I really want you to teach too, because it means you pay your rent, it's job stability, but if I told you to do that, I would be ignoring the part of me that came to New York from Puerto Rico without a plan and just trusting my gut. So if you trust your gut and you need to write this show, you need to write this show. And I'm very grateful to him for that advice, because it's why we're sitting here.
Believe me, I thought long and hard about I'm teaching him to be responsible. But it worked out.
It looks like it worked out.
It did.
Looks like that was a good life choice. All right, so why don't we finish our discussion on coffee?
Sure.
And so Lin-Manuel, I understand that you have a tattoo.
I have a coffee tattoo, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on my ankle, you want to see it? So me and my cousins in Puerto Rico, we wanted to there's a picture, that's way better.
But this is better. I mean, now everyone can go home and be like, Lin showed me his tattoo.
My sister and I are very close with our cousins in Puerto Rico who are a little younger than us, and it was one of those like drunken, we're all getting a cousin tattoo. We're getting a cousin tattoo.
This is New Year's Eve. I'm hearing them
And the only
discussing.
thing we sort of could agree on that we all loved equally was coffee. So New Year's Day, we're all in the West Village getting these coffee tattoos. The boys have them on their ankles and the girls have them on their wrists. It's 5 of us.
Yeah, well, it's sort of, prescient in a way, because now you've come full circle back to coffee, because it's such an important crop and opportunity. And I was learning from doing this research that the Pope drinks Puerto Rican coffee.
Correct.
It's
in
the best.
fact, I grew up with what I thought was a myth, that the Vatican ordered Puerto Rican coffee. And I was at some talk where I mentioned that, and a history professor at the Graduate Center then sent me actual invoices from the Vatican buying coffee from Puerto Rico in the 1870s.
Wow.
So it is not a myth. It was a reality. So knowing that, I figure the Vatican needs some coffee.
Yes.
Yeah, and coffee crops were just completely decimated by Hurricane Maria. And coffee crops in particular take a long time to grow. This is not something that grows back the next spring. These are 2, 3, 4, 5-year investments. So we formed something we informally call the Coffee Avengers, which is Nespresso, Starbucks, TechnoServe, who am I forgetting?
World Coffee Research.
World Coffee Research.
And a whole bunch of foundations that are working with us.
Yeah, so basically
on this.
work with local farmers, get them back up on their feet. And it's a multi-year investment because it doesn't grow back that quickly. They're a very tricky crop.
And the reality of coffee in Puerto Rico, it's that it's lots of small coffee growers. You're talking about acres. You're not talking about thousands of acres. You're talking about 75 acres. We're working now with 1,500 coffee growers in the island. That we're actually committed to make sure that they get 2.5 million little coffee trees
Yes.
to start crops again in the island.
So, audience, so I understand you're trying to raise enough for 2.5 million trees,
And each one costs $1.
$1.
It's very
right?
simple.
And
Very simple math.
all right, so here we go. There's an opportunity if anyone would like to contribute a tree or two or $1 million. Google.org is going to match all donations up to $500,000. So, Zeitgeist, together we could plant 1 million trees.
Plant some trees. Get us
Yes.
some good coffee.
Right, and the great thing by having TechnoServe and World Coffee Research, it's that we're also taking the farmers and moving them to ways in which they can use their knowledge and use it in a way that it's more effective. It's really not
Yeah, it's best
teaching
practice.
them new things. It's what you have and move them forward, but they need the trees to do that.
All right, well, let's join in together and let's thank Lin-Manuel and Luis Miranda for joining us today.
41444. Get us some trees.
Thank you. Thank you.